Hey church, good morning and welcome to worship here at Crossroads. If you're a guest with us, we're so excited that you're here. We're going to take a moment to learn a little bit about what's happening this week at Crossroads. Right now, I'm standing at the closing of the Men's Ministries Gauntlet competition. Congratulations to Jim Wilcox for winning this competition this year. We had a great experience here at camp and great weather, and God truly blessed today, and we're so excited about looking forward to next year's Gauntlet. Today, our little ones are headed to Papa Charlie's Pumpkin Patch in Chillicothe. If you have a little one that may be interested in this trip, we ask that you send them with an adult and with money to pay for entry into the pumpkin patch. We're going to provide lunch, and we're also going to provide dinner for the little ones today. But again, we just ask that you send them with an adult and some money for the experience. Today kicks off Operation Christmas Child. If you're not familiar with Operation Christmas Child, this is a box that we put together. As a church, we're hoping to put together 300 that you donate. And there's more information about that, what goes in the box, and the cost to put a box together for the shipping, all at the Welcome Center. And so we hope that you'll learn more about this ministry and this neat experience that Crossroads is doing this year for the first time. Finally, again, it's Pastor Appreciation Month. We hope that you will find one of many ways to thank our pastors for the work and sacrifice that they put into their job. At the Welcome Center, we have a box where you can put encouraging notes, gift cards, or any other type of contribution to them and their family, and a way to say thanks for all of their work throughout the last year and the years ahead.
Okay, I just want to say a few words about our Appreciation Week for our preacher. How much we appreciate what Matt does and what all the preachers do for us. They do a great job, and a lot of times we don't give them the credit they need to get. And I just want to take this opportunity to tell them just how much we appreciate it.
That's it for this week. We hope that you enjoy worship.
Have you ever had to make a choice that affects the rest of your life? No matter where we go, struggles come when we say yes and no. You have to make the choice. Both do not work. The fences we are riding, the lines we are straddling, create unneeded tension, because all we're really doing is hiding. We have a choice to trust. Yes to what matters most to God, and no to what matters to the world.
Hey, if you've been with us the past couple weeks, you know that we're in the middle of a yes or no series. If this is your first week, we all have choices in life that we're making. And as Jesus is preaching the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking about the promises, the choices that we make. And he says to the people that he's preaching to, it's a simple yes or no. It's not a both and, it's a yes or no, which means there's a choice. And sometimes choices are hard. Sometimes making a definitive choice and not trying to hold on to both sides is difficult. But week one, we jumped in with this idea that yes to Jesus, no to the world. Yes to Jesus, no to the world. Last week, we talked about our families. We say yes to our family, we say no to busy. Sometimes we have to say no to good things so we can say yes to the best things. And today, we're going to continue with this choices that we have to make. You see, when we begin to say yes to Jesus, in a world that wants to say no, all of a sudden life will begin to shift. When we consistently say yes to Jesus over and over and over again, in a world that says no, our lives will begin to look a little bit different, and life will become an adventure. And for some of us, that adventure is scary. For most of us, it's unknown, which makes it scary. For a lot of us, we feel ill-equipped. We have doubts. We have a whole bunch of reasons why we can't live this life as an adventure following God. And we're really good at telling God what those excuses are. Because when we begin to see life as an adventure, Satan is going to remind us of all of the fears and drama that we have in our life, right? And so as the choice sits on the table this morning, as we're going to look at someone in the Bible that had this exact choice to make. Do we say yes to adventure and no to fear? Do we say yes to fear and no to God's adventure? I want to pray and then we're going to jump in. God, I'm so thankful for your grace. I'm thankful that we can be here this morning and that we've chose to be here this morning. God, I'm thankful and grateful for this church. Father, for the faces that are around this room and the stories that we represent. We all meet here together to encourage one another, to laugh together. Father, maybe to give someone a hug. But God, because we desire to become more like you. And so I pray this morning that that happens. Father, I pray that if you need to speak to us in ways that we don't want to hear, I pray that we have ears to hear them. God, I pray that we get out of your way and that your truth will be made known. God, I pray that your voice is the loudest in the room and that as Satan tries to tell us a whole bunch of things that aren't true, God, we will be able to hear what you want from us. God, I'm thankful that because of your grace, a room full of sinful people, we can meet here together and we can celebrate your goodness. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Miles Harvey is an author, and he is probably most well known for his book, The Island of Lost Maps. And in this book, he tells a story of a character, Gilbert Bland. And this character in this story, the Island of Lost Maps, travels all over America. And as he travels all over America, he goes and he visits libraries all over America. And what he does is in these libraries, he finds old, valuable maps in the back of different books, and he cuts them out. And the story in this book is about how that takes place and the police work that's done to catch him and all of these things. But as he travels all over, he finds these valuable maps and he takes them. And when the author, Miles Harvey, is asked why it is that he came up with this story, why it is that he wrote this story, he began to explain how at the time he worked for an editor and he sat in a coffee shop every day and did his work. And in this coffee shop, there was maps all over the place. And all of these maps were maps that of different people's adventures. And there was maps up mountains, and there was maps in foreign countries. And then there was all of these maps, and then there was pictures. There's pictures of what all of these adventures look like. And then on top of all of these maps and all of these pictures, there was a big row of clocks. And on all of these clocks, and maybe you've seen these different places, there was a different country. And it showed what time it was in all of these different countries. And Miles Harvey told one of his reasonings for writing this story. He said, as I sat every day and looked at other people's adventure in life, I realized that there was none in my own. And I think that there's probably a lot of us in the room that could say the same thing. We hear of people doing all of these grand things and all of these crazy things for the kingdom. And we hear these adventures of people going and people speaking and people talking and these moments of faith. How is it in the middle of this you can hold on to your faith? And we look around and maybe we see all of this adventure. But in our lives, we feel like there's none. For 3 years, my sister and her husband lived in Japan. He's in the Navy. And I would frequently catch myself wondering, I wonder what's going on over there. Especially after we visited and kind of knowing the scenery. Wendy was always going places, trying something new, eating some sort of food that I would never eat. All right, but she was always trying something different. And so I would often catch myself wondering, I wonder what's going on over there. And I think a lot of times we do the same thing, but it doesn't have to be overseas. I wonder what this person would do in this situation. I feel like my life is so boring. I wonder what they would do. And we compare ourselves to other people's stories. We compare ourselves to other people's adventure. Meanwhile, we're missing the adventure in our own life. And we feel like we're stuck in the mundane. We feel like we're stuck in the normal. It's the same thing that we did yesterday, just repeated over and over and over again. And we get tired of dreaming of someone else's adventure. But if God were to call you to step up, if God were to invite you into an adventure that's unlike anything you've ever done, it's different than any place you've gone, an adventure that would require more faith than you've ever had in your life, would you go? Would you do it? Or would we chicken out? Would we come up with a bunch of excuses why we're not capable of doing something like that? I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm just not capable. I'm afraid of crowds. I don't like new places. There's different food. There might be other languages. It's not what I've known. It's a change. Would we step into the adventure, or would we cower in fear? Good thing for us is we've got an example to look at. If you brought a Bible this morning, we're going to be in Exodus chapter 3. Exodus at the beginning of the Bible, there's Genesis and then there's Exodus. And Exodus chapter 3 is where we're going to start. We meet a man named Moses. And God is calling Moses to do something completely adventurous, something outside of his normal. But in order for him to do this, he has to overcome some fears. You see, God is going to ask and invite Moses into an adventure, and he's faced with a choice. Do I say yes to adventure and no to fear, or do I say yes to fear and miss out on the adventure completely? Exodus chapter 3, to kind of catch us up into the scene, Moses is out taking care of his flock in his normal spot. It's where he normally hangs out and takes care of things. And all of a sudden he looks off into the distance and there's a bush on fire. And he thinks that's a little bit strange for just that bush to be on fire. So he gets a little bit closer and he realizes the bush is not burning up. And as he gets closer, he realizes that this is the presence of God. As all of a sudden he hears God's voice and he says, listen, you need to take your shoes off. You're standing on holy ground. And so Moses takes his shoes off, and now begins a conversation between Moses and God. And as this conversation takes place, Moses is invited to an adventure and he has a choice to make. Exodus chapter 3, beginning in verse 7, God says this: I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land and into a spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hittites, and Jebusites. Those are different people groups. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are opposing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. You see, God's people, the Israelites, they've been enslaved by Pharaoh, which means that they're being beaten, they're tortured, they're forced to work long hours that they don't want to work. And over again, these people are crying out to God, hey, come and rescue us. Please deliver us from this. And so Moses is hanging out in this field, and all of a sudden God says to Moses, hey, Moses, my people, they're miserable. And so what I need you to do is I need you to go, and I need you to have a conversation with Pharaoh. And I need you to tell Pharaoh that you're going to take the people and you're going to lead them to a better place. Which means you're going to walk up to the highest man in all the land and say, I'm going to take all of your slaves and leave you with nothing. Good. I'm glad you agree. I'm out. You can imagine if you were to try to place yourselves, if we're to try to place ourselves in Moses' shoes at this moment, there is fear all over the place. I mean, if you're standing in Moses' shoes and you hear God say, you need to go and talk to Pharaoh. I need to what? You realize who he is? You realize he can kill me in a matter of seconds. Pharaoh, that's what you just said? You just said Pharaoh, God, the one that's beating all of the Israelite slaves, that Pharaoh? I mean, there's all of these fears that begin to run through your mind. If you're in Moses' shoes, you think, wait a minute here, God. See, one of the first things that we need to see is if we're to live a life that's an adventure for God, we have to live in such a way where we can listen to God. And you notice where Moses is when he hears from God? Moses is not at church. Moses is not in some super holy place. Moses is out in the field, taking care of his flock, his normal spot, his normal place, where he is normally at each day. That's where God shows up. You see, Moses lived in such a way to listen to God. And for some of us, we look for adventure. Some of us, we look for the excitement of being a Christian. Some of us, we look for the adventure of following God, but we don't live our lives in a position to hear from God. And so we show up here on Sunday morning and say, God, show me something cool. Show me something new. Show me something adventurous. And then all week long, we live our lives in a position where we don't hear from God at all. And maybe all week long, he's wanting to invite us to an adventure. We're just not in a place to listen. It's in his normal place. That's where God shows up. Could it be that God is wanting to show up in our normal and invite us to an adventure, and we're just not living in a way that we can listen? So what's Moses' response? Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, we're going to pick up. It says, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, well, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me. And they ask me, what is your name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. You see, Moses' first response is excuses. Well, I mean, God, yeah, I know you want me to go, but what if I go and they ask me what your name is? I don't really know what to tell them. God says, okay, well, here's your answer. Here's your answer. Moses begins this game that so many of us in the room, we play, this what if game. Well, God, what if? I mean, what if I don't know? God, what if I fail? God, what if I'm alone? What if I don't meet the expectations? What if I don't know enough? God, what if I'm single? God, what if I'm divorced? God, what if I'm married? We come up with all of these excuses. It's almost as though Moses completely missed what God said. Moses said, I mean, who am I to go and talk to Pharaoh? And you notice what God's immediate response is? I will be with you. I will be with you. And it's almost as though Moses just completely misses that altogether. And I can't blame him because I miss it so many times as well. Maybe the reason that you're here this morning is to hear the words of God directly into our situation. I am with you. Maybe this week the reason that you're sitting here right now is for God to remind us, but I am with you. I've got this going on in life, but I am with you. God, I don't know your name, but I am with you. God, I'm facing loss and heartache. I am with you. My marriage is falling apart, and I don't know what to do. I am with you. My kids aren't listening. They're driving me nuts. I've got disobedient teenagers trying to run my house. I am with you. My finances are falling apart. I don't know where the money's going to come from. I am with you. I lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. I am with you. I've got physical pain. The doctors don't have answers. I don't know where to turn. I am with you. And if Moses would have heard that on the front side, all of the questions and fears would have been answered on the back side. The adventure in our life is found when we live in the I am with you. And when we miss that, our fears begin to dominate. Our fears begin to overtake what is going on in our lives. Why is it? Why is it that that promise of God is not enough for us to move? Why does the words, I am with you, sit in the back seat of the fears of our life so often? God says, I'm with you. I conquer the biggest obstacle. I'm present in the most difficult, and I'm capable when nothing else is. I'm here, and I'm with you. It still wasn't enough for Moses. Moses begins to question. So God continues to show himself. Jumping over just a little bit to the beginning of chapter 4, Exodus chapter 4. Moses answered, what if they don't believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? And the Lord said to him, what's in your hand? A staff, he replied. Then the Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, reach your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand inside his cloak, and he took it out. The skin was leprous and became white as snow. Now put your hand back in your cloak. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and we took it out. It was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe you or pay attention to the first sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these two signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said, who gave human beings their mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. But Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak, and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if your mouth, and as if you were God to him. But take the staff in your hand, so you can perform the signs with it. Now fear begins to dominate. Fear begins to overtake Moses' mind. And he says, well, what if they don't believe me that you sent me? And once again, God shows his faithfulness. He says, hey, take that stick in your hand, throw it on the ground. And what happens? It becomes a snake. And we know that fear is prevalent because it says Moses ran away like a little girl. All right, turns into a snake and he runs from it. God says, Moses, reach down and grab that snake by the tail. What? Grab it by the tail. So he grabs it, turns back into a staff. That's not enough for you, Moses? All right, put your hand in your shirt. Oh, pull it out. It's full of leprosy. Put it back in your shirt. Pull it back out. It's completely back to normal. If those aren't enough, I'll give you the ace in your pocket. And go scoop water out of the Nile River and pour it on the ground. It'll turn from water to blood. Over and over and over again, God shows up and shows his faithfulness in the situation. Over and over and over again, God invites Moses to an adventure and he says, I'm going to be with you. Don't live by your fears. And Moses does not get it. He doesn't understand. He's obviously not paying attention to what God is saying because he says, well, wait a minute. Pardon your servant. Or, God, don't mind my asking, but, what if they still don't believe me? God, I'm not really good at public speaking. That's all right, I'll take care of it. God, maybe you didn't hear me. I'm really not good at public speaking. And then when fear drives us to the point of disobedience, we get to a spot where I don't think any of us want to be. I don't want to be. Where it said the Lord's anger burned against Moses. That's not on my goal list. Have the Lord's anger burn against me. Nope. Not trying to accomplish that one. But our fears and our excuses can push us to the point of disobedience. You see, these fears begin to take over. They take over the situation. Moses misses everything that God is trying to invite him to because he's so focused on his own worries, his own concerns, how he's going to take care of himself. And over and over again, God says, no, I've got this. I don't want you to just know about me. I want you to follow me. I don't want you to just know about the story. I want you to live the story. And he uses exactly what Moses has right in front of him to show of his faithfulness. And sometimes saying yes to adventure is with what's right in front of us and in our hands. It doesn't mean that we have to travel around the world to live in an adventure following God in a world that says no to God on a constant basis. If we say yes faithfully, it will be an adventure. It will be different. It will be trying. It will be challenging. It will require bravery and courage. An adventure of trusting and following God doesn't mean we go halfway around the world. It means that we say yes to his faithfulness on a constant basis right where we're at. Our truth for this morning, friends, is your biggest fear is just a stepping stone to God's faithfulness. The biggest fears that we have in life, God stands on top of and he says, I am with you. And he invites us to step into this adventure. He invites us to live out the story that we read about. You see, when we say yes to Jesus in a world that says no, we step into his adventure. And yes to adventure is a life of constant faithfulness. And standing on the words, I will be with you. And I don't know what all of our weeks have looked like this week. I don't know what all of our joys of this past week have been, and I don't know what all of our struggles of this past week have been. But I know that God does not want us to just sit in what those are. He wants us to hear, I'm with you. I'm faithful. And you don't have to be afraid. Because I've got this. And the same God that promised to be with Moses is the same God that gave up his son to be with us for eternity. The same God that promised to walk with Moses through the desert is the same God that gave his son to a cross so we don't have to live in the desert any longer. The same God that told Moses, I will be with you in the hardest conversation of your life to rescue my people, is the same God that turned his son over to brutal torture so we don't have to live in the hardest moments of our sin anymore. Our biggest fears are stepping stones of God's faithfulness. Because he is with us. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to just hear the story if we're not going to live the adventure. I was in 10th grade. And my English teacher, her name was Miss Merkling. And in Miss Merkling's 10th grade English class, we read a book. And the reason I remember the book is because, being honest, it was one of the only books in high school I read cover to cover. All right? All the way through, every word. Okay? But just being honest. Right? And so the book that we read in 10th grade English was The Count of Monte Cristo. They've since made a movie about the Count of Monte Cristo. But I read this book, and I remember loving the book. I enjoyed the adventure of the story. I enjoyed the ins and outs and the plot twists and the different parts of the story as it came together. I loved reading the story and being entertained by it, which was few and far between in assignments in high school, I know. But I loved reading the story. There was a second part. There was a second part to reading this book. Not only did we have to read the book, but then we had a major project off of the Count of Monte Cristo. And what we had to do in Miss Merkling's 10th grade English class is that we had to create a storyboard for each chapter. And she gave us paper. I still remember what they looked like. There was like 4 squares on a sheet of paper, and we had to draw or somehow artistically communicate what was happening. And listen, I loved art. I mean, I took a bunch of art classes in high school. I enjoyed that. But what I did not enjoy, being honest again, homework in high school. I was not great at that. Okay, did not succeed real well at homework in high school. And so, while I enjoyed the story, loved the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, when it came time to do the work, I remember doing like 2 chapters. I had like 2 pages, and then it just kind of trailed off. And a couple weeks later, when we had to turn our storyboard project in for the Count of Monte Cristo, guess what I didn't turn in? I didn't turn in the work. And all the way through, Ms. Merkling told us, this is a major part of your grade in this class. I was like, oh, okay, I'll make up for it, whatever. Until I got my final grade for that class. Then I realized how big a part of the grade it was. And I learned that I failed 10th grade English because of a storyboard of something that I enjoyed. And I went into her classroom and I said, Miss Merkley, I mean, if I can redo it, I'll do it all. I'll hand it in to you tomorrow. I'll stay up all night. And she said, Mr. Steger, this is why we turn our work in on time. I'm sorry. And so that year, I got the fine privilege of going to summer school. And listen, summer school for us was not like, go to school and get paid a whole bunch of money and just play games all day and all that good stuff we got going. I know that you do work. I'm just saying. It was not fun. It was not enjoyable. It was not the outcome that I wanted whatsoever. It was a miserable summer. I love the story. I just didn't want to put in the work. And the outcome in the end was miserable. And as God invites us to say yes into an adventure, we love the story. We know the story. But friends, it's time to say yes to the work of the adventure. It's time to say yes to live the adventure in our lives. He's already made this way through Jesus for us to say yes to the adventure. Our excuses of too sinful, we've done too much, we've said too much, our history's too dirty, it's all out the window. Jesus took care of it. As he took on death, he put death in a grave once and for all. And he said, I want to invite you to this adventure of faithfulness where I am with you. Even if it costs me my son, I'm with you. I love you that much that I'm willing to give up my son to live with you for eternity. Our biggest fears in life right now, God stands on and says, I am with you. And I did not design you to live in the shackles of fear in this life. I designed you to live in my faithfulness and say yes on a constant basis in a world that says no. Because I am with you. Why don't we go ahead and stand this morning? When we say yes to Jesus, in a world that says no on a constant basis, our life becomes an adventure of God's faithfulness. And he did not send his son into this world so we can cower in fear in the corner. He did not give us his son as a gift so we can make up excuses as to why we're going to miss the adventure. He gave us his son to forgive us, to give us hope, and to equip us. That no matter what we're walking into, he's with us. Even as Jesus took on our sin and walked into a grave, his Father was still there and brought him out of the grave. And not even death wins this day. Death was put in a grave because God was there. Today as we worship, friends, maybe the only thing that we need to hear off this past week is I am with you. Maybe our fears have kept us on the sidelines of this adventure that God is calling us to. Maybe we've spent too much time telling God why we can't, and we've missed what he's calling us to. And maybe for some of us in the room, we're not living our life in a position to hear from God. And so we're missing an adventure. We're missing forgiveness. We're missing his faithfulness. Because we've not chose to live life in a way where we can listen to God. And maybe this morning that's where we start. So I need to say yes to Jesus before I can even figure out what this adventure looks like. This morning, will we say yes to the adventurous life of trusting in a faithful God? Or will we sit on the sidelines in fear? Yes to adventure, no to fear. Let's worship together.